the Sinking Fund, Associate Director at Deloitte Ghana, joins me. He is in the person of Dennis Brown. Good afternoon to you. So, Dennis, first question, how will the restructured domestic bonds benefit from the Sinking Fund payments in terms of future coupon payments?
Good afternoon, Daryl. Good afternoon to your viewers as well. I think, first of all, we need to understand what a sinking fund is. It's not something that is overly technical in terms of meaning. It simply means that government is, putting funds aside for a dedicated purpose. So in this case, for repayment of our debts, right? Let's say we have a finite income source, and so whatever we are generating from our various income sources, government is saying, I'm putting a certain amount aside to repay the coupons as they mature. And what does that, especially for potential or for investors that holds our bonds, is that there's some assurance that as these coupons mature, there will be little to no challenge in terms of recovering your money. There's money set aside for you to, recover the funds you have in there. So there's no need to panic, and it also helps in boosting confidence amongst these investors.
Yeah, there's a question my colleague raised here about how this fresh payments into the sinking fund, what impact it would have on Ghana's fiscal policy and the national budget as well.
Okay, so I did mention that currently as it is, we are dealing with a certain finite, income resources. And what government has done is to allocate a certain portion of it and dedicated it to debt repayments. What it then means is that there's the remaining portion that should then be, shared across the other expenditure commitments. Okay, and so what it does is to introduce some sort of constraints to the other expenditure commitments we have. So we can see that there's likely to be some type of constraints on our fiscal policies. But of course, I'm sure government has its own plans, perhaps around expenditure rationalization, where they are looking at, various drivers of our expenditures and cost, and checking which ones can be eliminated entirely, which ones can be minimized in terms of activities, which ones should then be prioritized, all in a bid to, make some cost savings and provide some fiscal space. Also to look at existing revenue generating measures and see how we can mobilize a lot more revenue from these measures, also to provide additional fiscal space. So this can happen within that context, and it will still manage to, if you like, eliminate or minimize the constraints that this allocation would transfer to the other expenditure commitments if government does it right. So yes, it will have some sort of bearing on our fiscal policy, but if done right, the government will be able to, if you like, neutralize the constraints that it introduces to the other expenditure commitments.
Yeah, and how significantly, for example, on our overall debt servicing burden. And I also wanted to find out what are the risks associated with the sinking fund, for instance.
Yeah, the impact on our debt service burden would be particularly within the short to medium time to reduce our debt service burden, because obviously as you pay your debt commitment, both principal and interest accumulated, you also do away with the servicing that comes along with it, because you don't have the debt, then you're not servicing it in terms of interest commitments anyway. But we've seen in time past that our governments have tended to rely on these domestic bonds. So it's not impossible for them to go back at a later time to issue more bonds, to sustain government programs, etc. That in itself is not a problem. We just have to ensure that we are doing that within a healthy economy that will sustain the repayments going forward. Once it's a cycle that you borrow, you pay as and when you need to, the confidence, from the investor community remains, and you shouldn't have, too much problems. We talk about the risk, right? The risk, I think I've already highlighted the main risks. The main risks, particularly considering that we are on an IMF program, is the fact that it may introduce, some constraints on other expenditure commitments. And if we are unable to mobilize revenue, increase our revenue, or get through or be successful with our expenditure rationalization, which is to reduce expenditure, then you're looking at instances where the constraints can lead to us missing out on fiscal targets that we have agreed with the IMF. and that can then have the impact of us, losing out on the funds that remains to be accessed. But let's not forget that the government has mentioned that they are looking at going back to the table with the IMF team to renegotiate the program. We don't know exactly what they are thinking. It could be around measures that relaxes the targets within the context of what they want to do, such that they may miss out on those targets, but they may be able to renegotiate for them to still have access to the funds, or maybe even increase the scope and the amount involved in the program in the first place. So all these options are on the table to look at. But the risks are there to also deal with.
I mean, we have just 30 seconds. You sort of mentioned its impact on investor confidence. I also wanted to find out, I mean, how significantly would this boost investor confidence?
Yes, this is quite significant, because what government has done is effectively to communicate that me repaying your debts is my number one priority. That is why whatever the size of my income resources are, I have made an allocation out of that to ensure that even before the coupons mature, there's a set amount to cater for payments of that amount. Again, all of this is happening within the local scene, but these are things that the international investor community looks at as well, including our international credit rating agencies. Whenever they do the ratings, they look at what's happening locally as well as what's happening with our foreign creditors. And so if this positive news is picked up and they can validate government's commitment towards ensuring that is sustained into the future, that's something that is going to impact positively on our credit rating. And hopefully it continues in that manner, and we are able to return to the international market to source for funding whenever we need.
Thank you so much. Dennis Brown, Associate Director, Deloitte Ghana. Appreciate your time with us on The Marketplace.